Hello, my art-loving people out there. I recently went to an Iain Stewart Watercolor Workshop for 3 days, and in this video I'm going to show you kind of an overview of what we did in the workshop, things I learned, and some paintings that weren't really complete, but still fun. I did make a video when I was going to the workshop about creating a palette of watercolors that kind of matched ones that he used, and we're going to have a good discussion about that because there were a lot of comments I found very interesting regarding curating this palette. So I will show you the palette again, which colors we actually used, why I created the palette, and anything that I may have learned from that. Let's get started. First of all, who even is Iain Stewart? Iain Stewart was born in Scotland, and he's lived in the US though since a very young age, and he's currently in Alabama. He's a signature member of the American and National Watercolor Artist Societies, plus he has many of his works in corporate and private collections, and he's won several awards nationally and internationally. His main occupation has been as an architectural illustrator. As you can imagine, that's probably very detailed work, so it's really fun to see his more loose style of watercolor because it is a really fun conundrum, like juxtaposition, the detailed architectural work versus loose watercolor. He's also an international brand ambassador for Daniel Smith watercolors, Stillman & Byrne sketchbooks, and the Escoda brushes. He does have a few books out there that are published. I'll put them on the screen right now. And he also has some instructional DVDs. And the fact that he came to a town somewhat near me was very exciting. It happens to be in the town where my grandma's house is still sitting empty-ish, waiting for me to clean it out, so I had a place to stay overnight while I was at this 3-day workshop. I think I'm going to talk about the palette last, so let's just get into the work we did during the workshop. Remember to go watch that first video, which I will link in the corner for you so you can see all the supplies that I packed for the workshop. What we ended up using was obviously quite a bit different. Yes and no. We used the supplies we brought, just not as many. We also had several printouts of photos that we ended up needing to bring with us. And I was hoping we would get to more of these photos and paint more of these, but that did not happen. Turns out when you have a group of 20 or so people, you don't get to do nearly as much as you are hoping. So we basically used this photo here and this photo. I brought watercolor blocks and sketchbooks and loose leaf sheets of paper, quarter size sheets, this size here. So this is 15 by 11. So if you cut a full sheet of watercolor paper, which is 22 by 30, into quarters, you get a 15 by 11 sheet. The first day was obviously introductions, who he is, who we are, etc. And it was in an art gallery, this workshop. So we got to see many of the paintings hanging because they were having a show and an open house and like awards for all of these. And Iain Stewart was one of the jurors in this art show, so he got to choose who won what. It was very interesting. I think his choices were quite nice, and a student of mine won an award too, which is really exciting. I didn't know about the show, so I didn't enter. I don't know what I would have entered, but I would have found something. Anyway, on the first day, we basically learned the graded wash because that's very important in watercolor, and how to keep the beaded line as you're going down. And then I kind of didn't remember to babysit my paper, and when you have a lot of water on a tilted surface, because we did work on a slightly tilted surface, we just put our tape underneath, tilted our board. That tape will push back the water, and it pushed up this line you see here on the bottom. So if I would have sopped that up with paper towel or a thirsty brush, this pushback wouldn't have happened, but Fabriano paper is what this is. It's very thirsty, and I didn't babysit it enough. I do like my wash though, and then a lot of people use this to create another painting, and Iain himself did a painting on this where he actually covered up most of this beautiful gradient, which is really sad because it's so pretty. I think if I were to do a painting on this, which I will eventually, I'm going to let some of that beautiful color shine through. And then this here was practiced for clouds and sky, and that is based loosely on this photograph here. So a lot of people then took this photograph and created that boat scene in the bottom part here, which I could still do, and I probably will still do. I'm definitely going to put this in my unfinished paintings pile and make paintings out of these. A, they're beautiful colors. B, very nice paper, so we've got to do something with them. We did watch a lot of demonstrations. There was a lot of chatting. And then we used this photograph here, and he showed us how to basically sketch things, how to use parts of the sketch as reference for other parts, you know, just keep things basic shapes and then cut into those basic shapes with your angles and so on. What parts to leave in or leave out of a composition. And then we were supposed to do the little sketch in our sketchbook or on a loose piece of paper, and then kind of throw in a map of colors where you might want to paint things and then make notes about it. So I had a dock here on the left that I decided I didn't want in my final painting. I wasn't sure about having a pole here. I didn't really like that idea. I thought maybe a tree would be better. He created some mud puddles in the front, which are not in the reference photo, so that there could be reflections, and I did really like that concept. You know, keeping in this really strong shadow here was, do you want to? Do you not want to? How strong do you want to make it? And then he said that he likes the shadow overlapping that door, or I guess door window. I'm not sure, I think it's a window. But it didn't work well in my composition. That overlap just kind of made it look wrong. So in a final painting, I do not overlap that. And then I don't really remember if we were just messing around here or what, but I just did this out of memory, based on a picture I had seen just recently. Anyway, I was trying to think of what it looked like, and that was kind of fun. But coming back to this picture and our little sketch, the third day, kind of the end of the second day and into the third day, we were supposed to finalize a painting based on that. The third day of the workshop, unfortunately, was a lot of talking and drawing. And I was there for a watercolor workshop, not a drawing workshop. But, you know, people were asking, what about cars and trees? And I think they were asking how to paint cars and trees, not how to draw them. But we got this pretty drawn out session on perspective and all of that. And that may have been great for some people, but I teach perspective drawing at the college. I didn't want to sit through 3 hours of perspective drawing. I wanted to see more painting, so I was disappointed in the third day. It kind of felt like he was done teaching, or maybe a little tired or something. I don't feel like we got a great value out of that third day, but I did still appreciate going, learning from him, etc. He paints on dry paper a lot more than I do, so even his skies are painted on dry paper. When I'm doing a sky, I usually wet the whole sky so that I have some time and softness in it. But I did try the dry painting style here with this one, more or less. And it is very fun to paint more on dry paper than wet paper. It's a whole different feel, and it's nice because your watercolors remain vibrant and so on. So anyway, back to this picture. Other than the building in this picture, I felt that it's kind of uninspiring. I don't really like the picture. I don't really like the composition. So I kind of planned on changing it up. So I drew the little house here, but I wanted a completely different background. And I did want this to be a tree, not a pole. I thought some rocks and more of a forest scene would be good. And so I have some mountains going on back here. Again, this is unfinished. I got very tired during the workshop and just kind of took it easy the third day and didn't do a whole lot. And I left a little bit early because I was kind of bored. So I still have to finish this painting too. I think my life right now is unfinished paintings, although I did finish 4 paintings yesterday. So I'm very excited about that. Anyway, back to this one. More cat hair on it. I just found an inspirational kind of forest picture online and incorporated this little cabin into it. You can see I moved my shadow up away from the window so that it would not overlap it because I didn't like that. I also lightened it up from the original sketch because that shadow in the original sketch was really dark and it made it look more like actual pieces of wood that had fallen as opposed to a shadow. So lightening that up helped a lot. And then, yeah, I just need to finish this up. So I guess I'll keep that Iain Stewart palette together until I finish this painting so I can use all the same colors. But I will be splitting that palette apart again and putting the colors back in their respective places. But let's talk about the palette now because that's pretty much all the painting that we did in the workshop. Yeah. Here's the palette, swatch sheet, and I have used this palette for several other paintings in my classes because they're just great colors. And there is one other painting I did start during the workshop that I just remembered about. Let me find it and show it to you. This one here, this is the subway at Zion National Park. So I started this painting in the workshop. I didn't get very far. It was a practice painting for my National Parks and Watercolor class that I teach at the college. And I don't know, the whole painting just is a little more complicated. What I usually do is practice on this 9x12 and then make the final painting on the 12x16. But since this painting was more intense, I just only did the 9x12, and this took several sessions and I just finished it yesterday or the day before, and now I'm calling it good. Anyway, it's a great palette to use, excellent colors. One color that I know needs to be in all of my palettes now is probably that Daniel Smith Undersea Green. It is a gorgeous color. And then of course, as I told you when I bought them last April, the quinacridone burnt orange and the quinacridone burnt scarlet are amazing colors as well. The quinacridone burnt orange is currently the PO48, and they say they have a lot to last a while, and the quinacridone burnt scarlet is a PR206, which is another pigment that is also supposedly going out of reach for us artists. However, I do love them both, and I'm so glad to have them. That burnt scarlet comes in handy so many times. It was used a lot in my Zion painting. I've also found a love for the neutral tint in this palette because it is very neutral and it darkens your colors without muddying them up or making them tilt to one color or another. So it's a very nice neutral tint. I'm gonna have to play with some other brands' neutral tints and see how they compare, but I'm very happy with this one. So as far as the size of the palette, this worked out really well because it has the 5 mixing spaces here and it has all of these little divots for extra mixing over here. And I just cleaned this up yesterday because I used this palette yesterday and it was a little messy, so I cleaned it up. But yeah, good size palette, holds more colors than you need, and it's great. But yeah, there were so many interesting comments about when I was curating this palette, and you guys, you can take whatever palette you have to class with you, not even look at what colors they are using, and paint just fine. We know that. I know that anyway. But I was dying to know, could I match the colors he uses? Would I even want to use the colors he uses? Do I even have the colors he uses? How does he use those colors? So that's why I chose to spend that day curating a palette that supposedly matched what he was using. I didn't have to do that. I did that for fun. So some people got very upset that so much time was spent trying to match his colors and bring all his colors, and why does he want so many colors in there anyway? I did it for fun. One of the most fun things to do is to see what colors you have compared to what other artists use. And you know what's funny? He even says in his supply list, don't try to match all these colors. This is just what I happen to use most of the time. Bring what you have, blah, blah, blah. But you know what happens? Do you know what happens in my classes? I'll use a color, a brown, let's just say any old burnt sienna, a brown. So I will say to my class, all right, just use kind of a light brown you have, maybe one that tints a little red. Wait, what color is that? That's what I get. That's the question I get all the time. Wait, what color is that? What brand is that? What color is that? So guess what? If he doesn't tell us his brand and his colors, guess what he's going to get asked all the time? Guess what he did get asked in class all the time? Even though he will be demonstrating and say, this is my burnt sienna, someone will inevitably say, wait, what color is that? What brand is that? So the fact that he has the list of brands and colors on the materials list for the workshop, he kind of needs to, because people are going to ask. So instead of fielding all these emails and questions before the workshop, he just has the list together, come with those colors or not. He doesn't care. He has a palette of 16 colors that he uses all the time, and then once in a while he'll grab a tube of something from his stash that he's like, oh, I could add this color in and use it real quick because I think it would be useful. But no, his palette is a palette of 16 full pans, and the list is for all the people out there that have to know what brand and color it is. But anyway, yeah, I get the same thing in my classes. Just bring whatever you have. If it's a brown, make it the value of brown you need it to be, but that doesn't work. People always need to know. They think they need to know the brand and exactly the color name. So we all do the best we can, right? The funny thing is, in that 16 palette of colors that he has, some of them were not even on that list that he gave us. So I found that pretty amusing. You know, we just all do the best we can with these classes. Colors that we used constantly, not constantly, colors that we used a lot in his class. The raw sienna. Oh yeah, that's right. This was raw sienna. I forgot about that. This is the raw sienna diluted, mixed with, I think, the Naples yellow. And then, yeah, we get into more raw sienna, and then I don't remember if we had the burnt sienna, but we definitely had the imperial purple here. Did I say imperial purple before? I might have named that one incorrectly. So his favorite colors you could tell to use are probably a little bit of the Naples yellow, but the raw sienna for sure, the burnt sienna, and if you didn't have the Winsor & Newton burnt sienna because it leans very orange, that's where the quinacridone burnt orange comes into play from Daniel Smith, because in his mind, and I asked him this specifically, these two colors are interchangeable. He also used a lot of the neutral tint. Anytime he wanted to darken one of his colors, he went for the neutral tint, which was fun. He used a little bit of the alizarin crimson, and that was fun. And his skies, it seems like he really likes to use the lavender and a little bit of the verded or blue. So he uses this lavender a lot. And I have found that it is quite pretty in the skies. And I have it in this sky, even though it's kind of mixed in and subtle. I have a little bit of it in this sky, but again, it's mixed in and subtle, so that lavender can really just be transparent and beautiful when it's not used incorrectly. Another color we used a ton of, I used a ton of, is this undersea green. Beautiful color. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, it needs to be in all of my palettes. I'm glad I bought an entire tube of it last year before my buying freeze, if you want to call it that. And I did fill up a half pan to give my student who was in the workshop with me because she did not have that color. So it's nice to have that tube so I can be generous with it and use it. And this used to be a big, I don't know if you can see it, maybe I could pull it out, but anyway, this used to be a pretty big mound on top of this half pan. And I have used it down into a little bit of a divot now, but it was overfilled at first, so I'm so glad that I have that, and I will probably, not probably, I will definitely be adding that into a mixed palette. And then I did use this gouache I think on the side of this tree, or no, not that one. I tried to use it here, but my paper was too wet and it just didn't work out. So yeah, we just ignored that. And then in this, everywhere you see like this light bluish color, here, here, in here, on the water, these dots over here, that is the Daniel Smith lavender. I did go over some of this area here with bleed proof white mixed with a little bit of lavender, and then I tinted over it again with the lavender because it was just too strong. So that is the lavender. This is the quinacridone burnt orange. This here is the quinacridone burnt scarlet, this beautiful red color you've got going here, here, and here. Neutral tint mixed in with those colors. This is neutral tint mixed in with the undersea green. This is neutral tint with undersea green, but mostly undersea green, and this is how undersea green looks as it comes out and starts to dilute. It's granulating, it's beautiful. I also have a little bit of lavender in here, and the lavender is also granulating. You can kind of see that. And I put a little bit of the quinacridone burnt orange in the water as well. I don't remember what I used for the bright yellow here, but this here is just diluted quinacridone burnt orange. This is more pure quinacridone burnt orange here. It's a PO48, I think. Yeah, just a pure PO48. Now it has a big divot in it because I used a lot of it. Same with this and the burnt sienna from Winsor & Newton. Neutral tint has a big dent in it, but beautiful colors. All of these rocks have undersea green mixed in with it. There's undersea green here, there's a little bit of tints of it up here, just throughout the whole painting. And that's one thing I did like that he stressed in his workshop was if you put a color somewhere in your painting, put it somewhere else in your painting, put it throughout your painting, make your painting cohesive. Make it work, make the colors flow. So really good messages there. So yep, we didn't use most of these colors. I may have dipped into this new gamboge once or twice. The Quin Gold I dipped into once, I think. But basically unused, 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 almost unused. I think I dipped into the burnt umber maybe one time. Just, I don't even see it anywhere, but maybe it was a dark in this shadow or something. I'm not even sure. Doesn't seem like it. Seemed like I used the burnt sienna mostly in this. Burnt orange and scarlet. So unused, unused. Cadmium red did not get used. Although the people that did the boat, the little ferry picture here, they did use the red for these posts here on the boat. The smokestacks, whatever they are. Barely touched the alizarin crimson quinacridone. I did put a hint of it in a painting somewhere. I don't even know where, but I remember touching into it once. I only used the imperial purple here, so just once. French ultramarine, I did touch a little bit of that, the cobalt blue and the verditer blue into the sky, along with a lot of lavender. But I could have gotten away with probably just one of these three blues here and the lavender. Cobalt green deep and phthalo turquoise didn't get used at all, although he did show some interesting color mixes with the phthalo turquoise. Undersea green we've talked about, used it a ton. I did use the gold greenish yellow in this little sketch painting here to get these brighter greens. That's a beautiful color. And then didn't use these really at all. I tried to use them on that post I told you about. Didn't work because I was too impatient, and then just never used them. So out of these 25 colors, we used 10 to 11 of them, which is probably pretty typical. Regardless, other than the third day where it was a lot of drawing lessons. I'm glad I went. It's always fun to learn from somebody. There used to be a lot more art teachers at the college I teach at, and I would take their classes, but that's getting harder and harder. There are less art teachers. They're mostly retiring, unfortunately, and they're often at the same times my classes are, so I can't attend. But when I can take an in-person class, I do. I always learn something because everyone has their own different style of teaching, their own different style of painting, and it's super fun to just grab little tidbits here and there of amazing things. So I think the biggest takeaway I have learned from the Iain Stewart workshop is paint on dry paper a little bit more, kind of experiment with that and see where it takes you. I'll still struggle with that in ways, but it's fun to keep in mind. And then he really encourages us to do drawing, like really detailed drawings and thumbnails. And I think the thumbnails are probably a good idea. It's something I could do more of. So we may incorporate that into my painting style too. I have no idea, but I would like to. He told me I should. Usually I just throw my sketch down on the watercolor paper and go for it. And that's kind of like my practice sketch. If it turns out, I'll just keep it. If not, I can redo it. But I don't mind the idea of doing a smaller one in my sketchbook first. I think that's kind of fun. It can really let you work out your colors, your composition, and so on. You can make notes for changes you want to do, etc. So those were my biggest takeaways. I, again, know all of the contradicting comments about curating this palette, but I did it for fun. I had fun doing it, even though it took me a lot of time. Going through my paints and comparing colors and trying to find stuff that matched, that was fascinating to me. And it really encouraged me to finish my watercolor database. This would have been a lot easier to do if I had my watercolor database finished. So that's going to be my next big project here in the studio. So subscribe if you want to see a lot of watercolor comparisons coming up in the future. I also have a lot of aquatone videos coming out, so you guys can see all those beautiful colors in that range, and I've done a lot of paintings with those. So I'm excited to show you. All right, guys, that was Iain Stewart's workshop in a nutshell. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now. And there's cat hair all over this already because it's been on the desk for like an hour.